A 4-year-old orphan girl is being pulled by her hair by bikers in the middle of the street. But a billionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Comment giving a rating from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The scorching afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt of the sprawling metropolis when the small orphan girl, appearing to be only 2 years old despite her actual 4 years, crawled among the stopped cars in traffic. Her thin arms trembled as she held a piece of cardboard found in the trash, turning it into her only toy. Tangled and dirty hair stuck to her small face where dried tears left marks on her dust-covered skin. The child didn't know she was being watched. 3 arrogant bikers, with open-faced helmets and cruel grins, slowly approached. The noise of the engines made the girl look up, startled, but it was too late to run. They surrounded her like predators, and the tallest of the 3 jumped off his bike, pulling the child's fragile hair with unnecessary force. "Well, look what we have here," he said, as the girl screamed in pain. "A rat playing in our street." The desperate cries echoed through the busy avenue, but the passers-by only slowed down for a few seconds before continuing their lives, pretending not to see the suffering before their eyes. The girl tried to break free, but her strength was insignificant compared to the brutality of the men. It was at this moment that the luxury car stopped a few yards ahead. The 30-year-old billionaire, with the looks of a movie star and owner of one of the largest construction companies in the region, watched everything through the tinted glass. His perfect face tightened into an expression of revulsion, not at the scene of violence, but at the dirt that this situation represented in his orderly world. He got out of the vehicle with calculated movements, his impeccable suit contrasting with the degrading scenery around him. The bikers stopped for a moment, assessing whether this well-dressed man posed any threat. "How much do you want to stop this?" asked the billionaire, taking his wallet from the inner pocket of his jacket. His voice was cold, businesslike, as if he were negotiating any contract. The bikers looked at each other, surprised by the unexpected proposal. The one who had pulled the girl's hair slightly loosened his grip, interested in the money being offered. $200 each, replied the leader of the group, testing how far he could go. The billionaire didn't hesitate. He counted $600 and extended the bills. "Get out of here." The men took the money and left, leaving the girl lying on the ground, sobbing and trembling with fear. When the billionaire approached her, the child recoiled like a wounded animal, her large, dark eyes filled with terror. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, but kept his distance. There was something in the girl's posture that intrigued him, a brilliant intelligence hidden behind the fear, an ability to observe that seemed far beyond her age. The girl continued to retreat until she hid behind a dumpster. Her torn clothes barely covered her malnourished body, and the billionaire noticed strange marks on her arms. They weren't recent street injuries, but older scars, too organized to be accidental. "Do you live around here?" he asked, but the girl only shook her head negatively without making any sound. The billionaire went back to his car, but something prevented him from leaving immediately. He watched in the rearview mirror as the girl came out of her hiding place and went back to playing with the cardboard, as if nothing had happened. There was an impressive resistance in that child, an inner strength that contrasted completely with her fragile appearance. Over the following weeks, he began to deliberately alter his daily route, always passing through the same area at the same time. The girl was always there, in different places, but always alone, always playing with trash, always running away from any adult who approached. The billionaire realized that she followed specific patterns. In the morning, she stayed close to a bakery where she got scraps of bread. In the afternoon, she positioned herself near a popular diner. At night, she disappeared completely, and he couldn't figure out where she went. It was during the 3rd week of observation that he noticed something disturbing. A woman of about 60 years appeared from time to time, always when the girl had gotten some money or food. The cruel woman had grey hair tied in a tight bun and wore simple clothes, but her eyes were hard as stone. She approached the girl with false kindness, but the billionaire observed through binoculars that the conversation always ended with the child handing over everything she had gotten. On one occasion, when the girl hesitated, the cruel woman pulled her forcefully into an alley, and when they returned minutes later, the girl was clearly hurt. The billionaire felt a growing anger but controlled his impulses. There was something bigger going on there, a more complex situation than simple neglect. He decided to hire a private investigator, a discreet and efficient man he had used in other business deals. The results of the investigation arrived 2 weeks later, and they were more shocking than he had imagined. The cruel woman was not a casual caregiver. She operated an elaborate scheme of child exploitation, controlling at least a dozen children in similar situations scattered throughout the city. The investigator discovered that she owned a property in the suburbs, disguised as an orphanage, but that in reality functioned as a base of operations for her criminal activities. The children were forced to work on the streets during the day, and all the money collected went directly to her. Even more disturbing was the discovery that the cruel woman owned several commercial properties in the central area of the city. When the billionaire saw the list of addresses, his blood ran cold. He recognized at least half of those buildings. They were constructions that his own company had built in the last 5 years. The connection was impossible to ignore. Somehow, his business success had indirectly contributed to financing the suffering of that girl and other children. The guilt he felt was overwhelming, but it also brought a fierce determination to correct the situation. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stayed on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, watching the city lights and thinking about the girl sleeping somewhere cold and dangerous. For the first time in years, his fortune, his stock investments, and all his assets seemed insignificant in the face of the suffering of a 4-year-old child. The discovery about his indirect connection to the girl's suffering turned the next few weeks into a real torture for the billionaire. He knew that any hasty movement could put the child in even greater danger, but the need to act burned in his chest like fire. During the day, he feigned normality in his business meetings, discussing contracts and investments, but his mind was always on the orphan girl. The private investigator brought increasingly alarming information. The cruel woman, who they discovered was called Auntie by the children, had built a real empire based on child suffering. She received government subsidies intended for fictitious charities, using forged documents and invented identities for multiple children who didn't even exist. "She's smarter than we thought," reported the investigator during a private meeting in the billionaire's office. "She has contacts at City Hall. She knows all the legal loopholes. Some of the children don't even have official documents. It's as if they don't exist for the world." The billionaire felt his stomach turn. The 4-year-old girl was probably in that situation, invisible to any protection system. He asked the investigator to intensify surveillance, but with extreme care not to alert the cruel woman. During this period, the billionaire began a different strategy. Instead of just observing from afar, he started frequenting the places where the girl appeared, always keeping his distance, but leaving small signs of his presence. A bottle of clean water near the dumpster where she hid. A sandwich wrapped discreetly placed where she could find it. The girl, with her sharp intelligence, soon noticed the patterns. Initially suspicious, she even threw away the food, fearing it was a trap. But hunger was stronger than fear, and gradually she began to accept the small gifts, always looking around carefully before taking them. It was during one of these observations that the billionaire witnessed something that left him deeply disturbed. The cruel woman appeared earlier than usual and caught the girl eating the sandwich. The reaction was instant and violent. She grabbed the child by the arm and shook her forcefully, shouting questions about where she had gotten the food. The girl, terrified, pointed to the dumpster, trying to explain that she had found it there, but the cruel woman didn't believe her. She dragged the child into the same alley where they had disappeared before, and this time the billionaire decided to follow them, staying in the shadows. What he saw made him nauseous. The cruel woman forced the girl to kneel on the dirty floor and began to threaten her, demanding that she confess who was helping her. When the child insisted that she had found the food in the trash, the cruel woman pushed her against the wall, causing a cut on her forehead. "If I find out you're lying to me, you'll go a week without eating anything," hissed the cruel woman. "And if someone is helping you, that person will regret being born." The billionaire had to use all his willpower not to intervene at that moment. He knew that a hasty action could result in the complete disappearance of the girl, and he would never be able to find her again. When they left the alley, he remained hidden for long minutes, trembling with anger and helplessness. That night he made a risky decision. He called the investigator and asked for a complete search of all the cruel woman's properties. He wanted to know exactly how she had managed to buy so many properties, especially those that his company had built. The results arrived a week later and brought an even more shocking revelation. The cruel woman had acquired the properties through a complex scheme involving corrupt City Hall employees. She used the children as a front, presenting herself as the director of several fictitious charitable institutions to obtain easy credit and tax exemptions. The most disturbing thing was that some of the children appeared in the documents as her adopted children, allowing her to receive multiple social benefits. The 4-year-old girl appeared in at least 3 different documents, with varying ages and names, always as a dependent of the cruel woman. "She's turned these children into commodities," said the investigator with disgust. "Each of them generates multiple sources of income, handouts on the streets, government subsidies, social benefits. It's a perfect business because the victims can't report it." The billionaire realized that he was facing something much bigger than a simple rescue. To save the girl, he would need to dismantle an entire criminal operation that involved government corruption and systematic exploitation of vulnerable children. That's when he had a daring idea. If the cruel woman only thought about profit, he would use that against her. He began to develop a plan where he would pose as an investor interested in expanding her operations, offering partnership in exchange for access to the information and locations where the children were kept. To make his false identity convincing, he created a shell company specializing in social projects and hired actors to pose as his partners. For 2 weeks, he established a false reputation in the business community, spreading rumors about major investments in charities. The investigator made the first contact, presenting himself as an intermediary for a philanthropic businessman interested in learning about successful social initiatives in the region. The cruel woman, always attentive to profit opportunities, showed immediate interest. The first meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at a popular cafe in downtown. The billionaire arrived 40 minutes early, watching every person who entered the establishment. When the cruel woman appeared, he felt a visceral hatred, but forced himself to maintain his business composure. She was exactly as the investigator had described. Grey hair pulled back severely, simple but well-kept clothes, and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything around her. She sat down at the table confidently, extending her hand in a greeting that he accepted with disguised disgust. "I've heard great things about your work with underprivileged children," he said, forcing a smile. "My company is always looking for serious partners for long-term social investments." The cruel woman's eyes sparkled with interest. "I've been working with this for over 15 years, she lied without hesitation. "I have 12 children in my care right now, all rescued from life on the streets. It's hard work, but rewarding." During the conversation, she casually mentioned the need for additional resources to expand her activities, and the billionaire realized that he had found the loophole he was looking for. Feigning enthusiasm, he suggested a visit to her facilities to see the work being done in person. "I need to see where my money will be invested," he said. "My partners are very discerning with social investments. We want to make sure the children are getting the best possible care." The cruel woman hesitated for a moment, but the prospect of a substantial source of money spoke louder than prudence. They scheduled the visit for the following week, and when they said goodbye, the billionaire knew that he had started a dangerous game where a 4-year-old child was the most precious piece on the board. The week of waiting until the visit seemed to last an eternity. The billionaire could barely concentrate on his businesses. His financial investments and stock trades seemed insignificant in the face of the urgency he felt. During this time, he instructed the investigator to intensify surveillance on all the locations frequented by the cruel woman, fearing that she might suspect something and move the children to other addresses. On the eve of the scheduled visit, he received an unexpected call. The cruel woman, with a syrupy voice but a tone that didn't fool anyone, informed him that she had had unexpected problems and needed to reschedule the meeting. The billionaire's heart skipped a beat. Was this an attempt to escape? Had she discovered his true identity? "What kind of problems?" he asked, trying to keep his voice controlled. "Nothing serious, just bureaucratic issues with the children's paperwork. You know how those official things are," she replied with a forced laugh. "How about next week? That way I can guarantee everything will be perfect for your visit." The billionaire agreed, but immediately called the investigator. The response he received made him even more tense. The cruel woman had spent the last 2 days visiting all her addresses, apparently reorganizing something. Even worse, some of the children who used to appear on the streets had simply disappeared. "Including the 4-year-old girl," said the investigator with regret. "She hasn't been seen for 3 days. The news hit the billionaire like a punch to the gut. All his precautions had been useless. The cruel woman suspected something and was hiding the evidence of her crimes. He spent the whole night awake, pacing the penthouse of his apartment, imagining the horrors the girl might be suffering at that moment. The next day, he made a desperate decision. He called the cruel woman and said that he had managed to speed up the bureaucratic procedures with his partners, offering a substantial amount of cash if he could make the visit that very day. The proposal was risky. It revealed an urgency that could arouse even more suspicion. "How interesting," she said after a long pause. $500,000 in cash is too generous a proposal for a first investment. Why the rush?" The billionaire quickly improvised. "My partners are international investors. They leave for another country tomorrow and want a decision today. It's now or never." Another pause. He could almost hear the calculations being made in her mind. $500,000 represented years of exploitation of the children. It was an amount difficult to refuse. "Very well," she said finally. "But with one condition. The visit will be quick, just to see our main facilities. Some children are sick and cannot receive prolonged visits." The billionaire agreed, but his heart sank. Sick children probably meant children too injured or traumatized to be shown to strangers. He feared the state in which he would find the orphan girl. The address provided was in a peripheral area of the city, in a single-story house surrounded by high walls. When he arrived, he immediately noticed the bars on the windows and the gate with several locks. The entire property had an air of disguised prison. The cruel woman greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to our home," she said, leading him through a modestly furnished room. "As you can see, we prioritize the comfort of the children above all else." But the billionaire was not fooled by the staging. He observed every detail carefully. The external latches on the bedroom doors, the sealed windows, the smell of strong disinfectant trying to mask something more disturbing, and especially the absolute silence in a house that supposedly housed 12 children. "Where are the children now?" he asked, feigning casual curiosity. "Some are at school, others resting," she replied quickly. We maintain strict schedules to ensure discipline and organization. It was a lie, and they both knew it. There were no schools in the area, and the silence in the house was unnatural. The billionaire realized that he was being led only through the presentable areas of the property, while the children were probably hidden somewhere in the house. During the visit, the cruel woman showed forged documents with impressive numbers, reports of expenses with education, food, and health of the children. Everything looked official, but the billionaire noticed inconsistencies in the stamps and signatures. She had prepared well to receive naive investors. Our results speak for themselves, she said, showing old photographs of smiling children who clearly were not the same ones under her current care. In 5 years, we have managed to socially reintegrate more than 50 minors at risk. The billionaire forced himself to show interest, asking questions about educational methods and rehabilitation programs, while mentally cataloguing every evidence of crime he observed. It was then that he heard something that made his blood run cold. A muffled cry coming from somewhere in the house, quickly interrupted. The cruel woman pretended not to have heard, but her eyes hardened. How about we see the kitchen? It's where we prepare all the nutritious meals for our children. He followed her, but his attention was focused on locating the source of the crying. It seemed to come from a corridor that she carefully avoided showing, always directing him to other areas of the house. When he tried to approach that corridor, she blocked him subtly. There's nothing interesting here, she said firmly. Just supply deposits. But the billionaire had seen enough. That corridor led to an area of the house where the children were really being kept, probably in deplorable conditions. His urgency to finalize the negotiation grew exponentially. I am impressed with the work developed here, he lied. My partners will be satisfied. We can formalize the investment today. The cruel woman's eyes flashed with greed. $500,000 will represent a complete transformation in our operations. We will be able to significantly expand the number of children served. He understood perfectly what she meant. More children to exploit, more false documents to get subsidies, more profit based on child suffering. But he feigned enthusiasm with the prospect. Actually, he said, lowering his voice as if to reveal a secret, my partners were so impressed with the preliminary reports that they authorized an even larger investment. We're talking about $2 million for a long-term partnership. The cruel woman almost lost her composure. $2 million represented more money than she could earn in a decade of exploitation, but her greed also aroused greater caution. That's very generous, she said slowly, but an investment of this magnitude would require full transparency. My partners would need to know every aspect of our operation. Naturally, replied the billionaire, but we would also require certain operational adjustments. My partners are very discerning about where they invest their capital. They spent the next hour negotiating details of the fictitious partnership, while the billionaire mentally planned how to use that information against her. The cruel woman, blinded by the prospect of money, began to reveal details of her operation that she should never have shared. She mentioned other addresses where she kept children, names of public officials who helped her forge documents, and even specific amounts she received for each child exploited. The billionaire recorded everything discreetly on his cell phone, building a complete file of evidence. When they finally said goodbye, with promises to formalize the agreement next week, the billionaire knew that he had enough information to destroy the entire criminal operation. But he also knew that any hasty move could cost the lives of the children under that woman's control. On the way back, he called the investigator with specific instructions. He wanted constant surveillance on all addresses mentioned by the cruel woman, and was prepared to spend any amount necessary to ensure the safety of the children. Because now he was sure that the 4-year-old orphan girl was alive, hidden somewhere in that network of horrors, waiting for a rescue that he was determined to execute. The next 3 days were the longest in the billionaire's life. He had instructed the investigator to maintain constant surveillance on all addresses related to the cruel woman, but the news that arrived was increasingly alarming. The children had been transferred from their usual locations, and the exploitation network seemed to be dismantling rapidly. On the morning of Wednesday, he received a call that left him desperate. The investigator had discovered that the cruel woman was planning to liquidate her operations in the city and move to another state, taking with her only the most productive children. The others would be abandoned or handed over to other people in the criminal network. "She scheduled a meeting for tonight with interested buyers," reported the investigator with urgency in his voice. "From what we managed to intercept, it will happen in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial area. If we don't act now, we lose these children forever." The billionaire felt the world collapse around him. All his attempts at infiltration had failed, and now the children were at even greater risk. But then he had a desperate idea. If the cruel woman was selling the children, he would be the buyer with the best offer. He immediately called her, feigning business panic. "My partners found out about our negotiation and are furious. They think that 500,000 is too little for the potential you have. They want to make a final proposal today. $5 million to buy the entire operation." The silence on the other end of the line was long. $5 million represented more money than she had ever dreamed of possessing, but it was also an amount too suspicious to be real. "That's impossible," she said finally. "Nobody pays $5 million for a social operation." The billionaire took a deep breath. It was time to reveal his cards. "Because it's not for social operation. My partners discovered the true nature of your business and want to expand to other states. They have contacts all over the country." The confession hung in the air like a bomb. He had just declared himself a criminal, betting that her greed would be greater than her caution. For long seconds, only the sound of her heavy breathing was audible. "Where and when?" she asked finally. "In the warehouse you already chose, but I want to see all the merchandise before closing the deal. All the children, all the documents, everything." "All right, but bring the money in cash. And come alone." When he hung up, the billionaire realized that he had put himself in an extremely dangerous situation. But it was the only chance to save those children. He immediately called the investigator and instructed him to discreetly contact the authorities, providing all the evidence collected, with instructions to await his signal before acting. The warehouse was in an abandoned industrial area, surrounded by other empty buildings. When he arrived at 8 o'clock in the evening, he saw several cars parked outside. The cruel woman was not alone. There were at least 6 men with her, all with an intimidating appearance. "Did you bring company?" asked the billionaire, trying to keep his voice steady. "Protection," she replied dryly. $5 million requires extra precautions." Inside the warehouse, the scene was even worse than he had imagined. The 12 children were grouped in a corner, sitting on the cold floor, all clearly terrified. Some had recent marks of violence, others looked sick or malnourished. And there, in the middle of the group, was the 4-year-old orphan girl. She was different, thinner with new injuries, and her big eyes had lost that spark of intelligence that the billionaire admired. When their eyes met, she showed no recognition, only the same empty terror he saw in the eyes of the other children. "As you can see, the merchandise is in perfect condition," said the cruel woman with businesslike coldness. "Each of these children generates an average of $1,500 per month between handouts, benefits, and subsidies. It's an investment that pays for itself in less than 2 years." The billionaire had to control all his anger not to explode at that moment. Instead, he pretended to examine the children as if they were products. "Some seem damaged," he said, pointing to those who were clearly injured. "Nothing that can't be solved with proper discipline," she replied. "Children test boundaries. It's natural." It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. The orphan girl, despite all the fear, recognized the billionaire's voice. It was the same voice that had yelled at the bikers weeks ago. the same that she had heard when she found food and clean water in the places where she hid. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she raised her eyes to him, and in that look the billionaire saw something that took his breath away. Hope. Despite all the suffering, despite all the traumas, that extraordinary child still had hope. "I want to talk to them," said the billionaire. "I need to know if they are obedient." The cruel woman hesitated but nodded. He approached the group of children, knelt on the cold floor, and looked directly at the orphan girl. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The children remained silent, but the orphan girl, with a courage that surprised everyone, whispered, "To be sold." The brutal honesty of the answer shocked even the men who accompanied the cruel woman. It was the public confirmation of the crime they were committing, coming from the mouth of a 4-year-old victim. "Very clever," said the billionaire, looking directly into the girl's eyes. "And would you like that to happen?" "No," she replied, still whispering, but with increasing determination. "We want to go home." "What home?" he asked gently. "Any home where it doesn't hurt," said the girl, and her words cut the hearts of everyone present like razors. It was at this moment that the billionaire realized that he could no longer keep up the charade. He stood up slowly and faced the cruel woman. "Change of plans," he said, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I didn't come to buy these children. I came to save them." The silence that followed was as tense as the string of a violin about to snap. The cruel woman's men automatically positioned themselves threateningly, but the billionaire had already dialed a number. "You can come in," he said into the phone. In a matter of seconds, the doors of the warehouse swung open and a team of police officers stormed the place. The operation had been perfectly coordinated. The private investigator had worked with the authorities to ensure that the entire criminal network was captured simultaneously. The cruel woman tried to escape, but was quickly immobilized. While arresting her, one of the officers found a briefcase with documents that proved the full extent of her crimes. It wasn't just 12 children, but more than 40, scattered across 3 different states. During the confusion of the arrest, the billionaire rushed to where the children were. The orphan girl, despite her fear, stretched out her thin arms to him, finally recognizing her protector. "It's going to be okay now," he said, picking her up in his arms for the first time. "No one will hurt you anymore." The following weeks were of intense recovery. The billionaire used part of his fortune to establish a specialized rehabilitation center, hiring the best psychologists and doctors in the country. Each child received individualized care, and they slowly began to recover from the traumas they had suffered. The orphan girl was the one who took the longest to speak again, but when she finally did, her first words were for the billionaire. "Thank you for not giving up on me." 6 months later, all the children had been officially adopted by carefully selected families, all except the orphan girl. The billionaire had discovered that he couldn't separate himself from her. That extraordinary child had changed his life completely. On the day of the official adoption, now 5 years old and fully recovered, she organized a small surprise party for him. With the help of the other children and the caregivers at the center, she had prepared a simple cake and a drawing showing the two of them together smiling. "Are you my real dad now?" she asked, handing him the drawing. "Forever," he replied, with tears in his eyes. The cruel woman was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and her entire criminal network was dismantled. The billionaire used a significant portion of his assets to create a foundation dedicated to combating child exploitation, ensuring that other children did not go through the same suffering. And that night, when he put his adopted daughter to sleep in her new room, decorated with colorful drawings and full of toys, the billionaire realized that he had found the most valuable investment of his life, the love of a child who had learned to trust again, despite everything. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.